Good morning. This virtual public hearing conducted by the Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, Power and Energy Utilities and the Arts is called to order at 9:07 a.m. Notice of the hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets on September 15th of 2021, with the second notice provided on September 20th of 2021. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website. This morning, the committee will hear testimony on Bill number 66-36 COR as amended by the committee. An act to amend subsections 58206, section 5202, section 58203, from Article 2 of Chapter 58, Title 12, Guam Code, Annotated, relative to modifying the sunset provision of the Special Qualifying Certificate 1600 hotel rooms development program, and adding the cost of renovation as being eligible for certain benefits as a new feature of the program, introduced by James C. Moylan and Tina Rose Munoz Barnes. Before we proceed with the hearing testimonies, I will provide the panel participants with some general rules of conduct for this virtual public hearing. All participants must abide by the rules of conduct and quality assurance standards, including the chair will invite individuals who have signed up to testify. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking and shall state their name, title, and organization for record purposes. Please ensure that you are unmuted and that you are speaking clearly into your microphone. For group settings where more than one individual is present, please state your name before providing comment. From among the panel of senators, each member will be allowed to pose one question to an individual testifying for one round and be provided another round if necessary. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violations of this rule of conduct will result in removal from the meeting room by the host. I would now like to welcome my colleagues joining us today, Senators Tony Ada, Amanda Shelton, Jim Moylan, Chris Duenas, Joanne Brown, and Tello Tadigui. Thank you for joining us this morning. We'll now proceed with discussions on Bill number 66-36 COR. A public hearing for Bill number 66-36 COR as introduced was held on May 19th of 2021. Participation in that public hearing resulted in several suggested amendments to the original bill. The sponsor of the original bill wanted to have those amendments made. So today's public hearing will be to discuss the bill with those amendments. I'll now give the primary sponsor of the floor, and I'll give the primary sponsor the floor to introduce and speak about the amended bill. Senator Jim Moylan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, colleagues. Also, good morning, Gita, for the second hearing we're having on Bill 66-36 as amended by committee. Previously, back in May, when we had our original testimony for this bill as introduced, we did have excellent comments coming back from Gita and those who testified on behalf of this bill. And I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, the opportunity to have a second public hearing to assure that the public is aware of these changes that we made to Bill 66-36, which further strengthens the bill for the betterment of the island and our industry and tourism, extending the qualifying certificate on needed expansions to include renovations as well as part of this QC. Originally, in a brief history, this qualifying certificate for hotels was back in 2014 when it became law under former Governor Eddie Calvo at that time. And the bill was originally introduced by Senator Dennis Rodriguez, which became Public Law 32233. They were very accommodating during the original public hearing for this bill to testify in favor, and were made aware of the additional changes that Gita was presenting that day as they participated in the public hearing, as well as most of us here today. So I'm looking forward, Mr. Chairman, giving the opportunity, especially to Gita, who have made these changes. And I thank the committee for including that in the amended version of this bill. And thank you for this public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Now I will call on those who've joined us today in order of how they appear on the sign-in sheet. I do see Melanie Mendiola from the Chief Executive Officer, Administrator of GITA. Good morning. Do you have testimony you can provide with us this morning? Provide for us, excuse me.
Buenas and half day, Mr. Chair. I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
All right, will do. Hafaday, Chairman Ridgell, and members of the Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, Power, and Energy Utilities and the Arts. And thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on Bill 66-36 as amended. My name is Melanie Mendiola, and I'm the CEO Administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority. GIDA wholeheartedly supports this latest version of the bill and is grateful for the efforts of the committee and the bill's sponsors to enhance and extend the Special Hotel Qualifying Certificate Program, the Special Hotel QC. The amended language contained in Bill 66 is based on input provided to GIDA from various stakeholders. The bill makes key improvements to the Special Hotel QC law that has the potential to aid in economic recovery and the revitalization of the local tourism industry. By providing a more robust incentive program for the renovation and/or expansion of existing hotel properties, we hope to encourage additional investment to existing rooms and facilities, which will not only make our local hotels even more aesthetically attractive, but also more modern and efficient. This in turn has the potential to greatly increase the overall quality of Guam as a visitor destination, which will attract a higher yield visitor. Also, by extending the program for an additional 10 years, we aim to give our local hotel operators ample time to take advantage of this tax incentive. GIDA is hopeful that Guam's recovery with regard to both the public health and economic health will be swift. Bill 66, as amended, has the potential to increase investment in our hotel facilities, which will be a strong sign to international visitors that Guam's visitors industry is gearing up for the eventual full return of travelers to our island. GIDA respectfully encourages and urges the passage of Bill 66-36 as amended. Thank you for your time and attention. And if you have any questions, I welcome them now or as well after the hearing.
Thank you, Melanie. We have Ed Camacho from GIDA also signed in, but I'm not sure if I don't see him online at this point. The next person.
Ed will not be providing testimony. I'm sorry. Okay, that was a mistake.
Matt Baza from GIDA is signed in.
Sorry, I think there was a miscommunication. Just me providing testimony.
Okay, great.
They're my support. They're my support squad for this one.
No problem. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, so that's everyone who signed up to provide testimony today. With that, I'll allow my colleagues now the opportunity to ask questions, beginning with Senator Amanda Shelton. You're recognized.
Hey, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Good morning, Ms. Mendiola, Hafaday. Thank you for being here today to once again provide testimony on the bill. I think you answered most of my questions during the first round of during the first hearing. But I think I wanted to know if there has been any movement since the extension to the December 2021 deadline of any other hotels committing to renovations.
There has not been. Having said that, there is, so as you may well know, the Fiesta has been taken offline for some significant renovations. There were inquiries they made regarding the QC, but they did not follow through with an application.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your time today.
I'm sorry, Senator. We do actually have one that also an inquiry. Was it a?
They do. They have an old application trying to update.
Oh, okay, so the Bayview Hotel has an old application that they're trying to update.
Okay.
For renovation.
All right. Thank you very much. So how many rooms is that? Are you thinking?
341.
Just a moment. 341.
Okay. And can you tell us how many rooms Fiesta is? I know they don't have an application, but just in case.
That we're not sure of.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Senator Ada, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ms. Mendiola. Thank you for your testimony again. Probably the question I have is, so if this piece of legislation gets passed in this session or perhaps the next session, whichever, would this allow the Fiesta or other hotels to come back now, and or is this going to be prospective moving forward for those that haven't applied yet? Are you still on mute? Yeah.
They can yes, sorry. Thank you for that question, Senator. They can apply today if they have future renovations planned. And let me just confer with our business development manager if it's if they can use it retroactively.
It would be too expensive.
It would only be for expenses going forward, not retroactively.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking at. And then also, so do you think that I noticed we went from 10% for a new build to 20% for hotel renovations and expansions? Do you think that there is reasonable and just?
The motivation, Senator, behind the shift in the language was, if you recall, last year when we were discussing with stakeholders this bill, one of the items was that because of COVID, due to COVID, a lot of hotels were going to take advantage of the time that they had without the visitors to potentially take sections of their hotel offline to be able to undergo renovations and expansion. And it's always been, it seems lately, I mean, it seems to have been a plan of the Guam Visitors Bureau. And I can't speak for GVB, but I know that there are some here that have experience with GVB. And from what I see, GVB has been trying to market Guam kind of more to a higher margin visitor. So trying to attract a visitor who spends a little bit more. And in order to do that, they recognize that the quality of our hotels needed to be upgraded. And our hotels needed to be upgraded, updated. And then, so there's that, but then there's also the sustainability factor. When you're building a brand new hotel, as you know, Senator, there's a lot going on as far as the environment is concerned. And so one of the things that we are looking at is really just lessening the environmental footprint by enhancing the quality of our existing hotels rather than increasing the quantity. Although both are needed, quantity is needed just as, but quality is needed as well. So that was the motivation behind the stakeholders' input and our subsequent input to the amendments, speaking to the amendments specifically on renovation.
That's great to hear. And then also, and my concern there, and you mentioned it about the pandemic that we've been going on this past 18 months. And do you think that it would be, because the Fiesta went offline, during the pandemic, and to let them take advantage of this piece of legislation to where, because they're going to suffer just as much as everybody else, but they're doing this renovation for the quality of their guest services that they'll be able to provide in a upscale hotel now. So do you think that we should think or consider, going 18 months back or during from the time COVID, what the pandemic was declared forward?
I think that I wouldn't really weigh in on, I don't know if you would make a one-time exception as a result of the pandemic. I think that would be fine. I would ask for maybe additional consideration before granting retroactive expenditures just in general, under normal market circumstances, right. I guess is what I mean to say. So under normal circumstances, I don't know, I'd need to do a little bit more research and really kind of understand the risks associated with any kind of retroactive benefit. But with regard to the pandemic, I certainly think that Tumon could use the help. And so I would be open to it. Yes, I would agree that I would be open to it. If that was
well, that's good. That's good to know. I think we just need to just put everything on the table, right, and just kind of discuss it. And that's what these public hearings are for. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But at least we can say we spoke about it, and this was the outcome. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Mendiola. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Ada. Senator Duenas.
Tidus Masi, Mr. Chairman, and much like my other colleagues, I just probably have a follow-on question to what Senator Ada was discussing, but certainly this is a great bill. A lot of things, questions were answered, much like the Secretary said in the first round, and then of course, I think the amendments have improved the bill quite a bit. Mel, you're absolutely right. I remember quite a few years back, actually, there's been discussion about kind of what they call the Palau model. That's something that Palau had shifted to, that they really wanted to go more high end and try to attract that visitor as well. So I think you're absolutely on point with regard to this. So it's a great bill. I think what Senator Addo was discussing, Mel, maybe in order to make you and perhaps the front office and others more comfortable, I can understand you're considering the tax revenue implications currently, but maybe what Senator Addo is on to, we could amortize it going forward, that it wouldn't be a one-shot, effect if that's something that happened with regard to, that benefit. So maybe I'll put that on your radar as well, Mel, that if we do decide as a body and put that up for consideration, we'll talk to the sponsors, of course, and the rest of the members of the body. But I think it's important because they have made that considerable investment, and had this bill, had an opportunity earlier, they probably would have been part of it, of course. And so, Mel, I just wanted to put that on your radar as well. As we consider this together, maybe you can work with BBMR and Rev Tax and assess the economic impact. But maybe if it is a decision, it'd be amortized going forward and not like a one-time shot where it would have a major tax event. So those are just my thoughts. Any comments on that, Mel?
I think, thank you, Senator, for that question. I think that's a very keen observation. I think that what's important to note about the special hotel QC, that it is a contract that can be extended up to 20 years. And when a hotel is making such an investment, it's not likely that they would be recovering all those profits, right? And gross receipts immediately. It's expected that it will amortize over time. So probably the biggest hit to the taxes wouldn't be for a couple years. And God willing, we're out of a pandemic situation and in a good economic situation, and we could plan effectively for the tax impacts. But most definitely, we will work with the front to quell their concerns on that.
Excellent. I really think this is the thing to do. I think everybody's got all hands on deck with regard to understanding the absolute vitality of our industry. And I want to thank those hoteliers that continue to be bullish on Guam, if you will, and ensure that there are fine accommodations here for when we return to bringing our guests back to Guam. And so I think it's the right thing to do. I know that sometimes, of course, the word QC can be a dirty word sometimes in the past, sometimes. And, I guess when we were flush with cash and doing good, that's kind of a consideration. But certainly, I think this is timely right now. And we appreciate your support, Mel. And I just want to listen to the balance of the conversation. Masi, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Senator Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I did want to ask, the original intent of the QC was, of course, to attract investors. In this particular case, we're focused on hotel construction, but to attract them to Guam and build their facilities and certainly, contribute to the expansion of our tourism industry. And of course, over time, we know that the ownership of these hotels change hands. And so you have the original owner who benefited from the tax benefits of the construction of the hotel. And now we're looking at expanding it to renovations or expansion of their existing facilities. So I really wanted to know, long term, what are we looking at? Of course, we can see the benefits of having additional rooms, and we're hopeful that at some point our tourism industry will fall back into place and we're going to have the level of visitors that we had in January of last year and hope build on that. But is the intent to continue to really subsidize this process through these continuing qualifying certificates rather than they sunset, so that actually these revenues can go back into the tax base of our community? And I want to get feedback from that, because I can just see how this thing can continue indefinitely if we continue to give out these benefits every time there's a renovation. I mean, if you own a hotel and you want to maintain it to any standard, you're going to have to renovate it every so many years. I mean, 10 probably is stretching it, but I think that would be pretty standard in the industry to maintain the clientele, obviously, that they would like to attract to their hotel. But is this the intent, is to really allow this to be a continuing process where really we'll never get to the point where hotels really are ever going to pay back into the taxpayer of Guam? Granted, they're providing employment. Granted, it is contributing to our tourism-based economy. But a lot of people also do that in other businesses, and they also pay taxes. So I just wanted to get some feedback from the author, and then also from Ms. Mendiola from GITA. Is this really a permanent situation that we're creating here with regards to hotel construction and hotel maintenance over time? Because I just wonder where the end sight is, because that's what our people were told. This is to start an incentive, but it wasn't always intended to be a forever benefit, and it's really looking like that's what we're expanding this to be.
Thank you, Senator. I'm not sure, is Senator Moylan supposed to answer first and then me, or can I go ahead and?
I just defer. I guess maybe you can, because you've already started. By all means, if you can give your thoughts and your feedback on that question.
Right. I think that's a great keen observation, Senator Brown, because I think because when qualifying certificates were created, they were created for the specific purpose of creating jobs and creating industry. And when an industry is mature, when there is a wealth of talent, when there's a highly competitive environment and all of that, and then I do think that it's worth considering. I do think it's worth the legislature considering sunsetting this product and saying, okay, we're good. The hotel market is mature. I think that specific to this QC has a 10-year sunset provision as it is. So in 10 years, I think the body can certainly revisit whether or not they'd like to continue on with this QC. Will we achieve the number of rooms by then that meet the demand? I'm not sure. And so I think the motivation behind this QC, which was proffered in a previous administration, was to increase the inventory by 1,600 rooms. And because of such an ambitious goal, because the demand so far exceeded the supply, we needed to make ourselves competitive, and this was the way to make ourselves competitive. If we'll be in that situation again, and then 10 years, we like 10 years because we've seen in the last 10 years, I mean, time flies, obviously, but we've also seen the H-2B visa issues that we've had, and we also see the concentration of military that is coming into the island at such a kind of a rapid pace. And so at this point in time, we do believe that 10 years is fine. And we believe that for multiple reasons. Number one, because the H-2B visa crisis is not yet solved. We still have a labor shortage, which means that construction starts are slow. And so that's probably the first thing. The second thing, demand in a non-pandemic environment was exceeding supply, continuing to exceed supply all the way up until the start of the pandemic. And if our plan is to recover towards to our existing numbers, then demand will start exceeding supply at that point in time. And the third, again, was to improve the visitor experience by improving the existing rooms we have, many of which have not been updated since they were first built during the boom in the 80s. But I absolutely understand what you're saying. I think we can't just give out tax benefits to renovate every 10 years and let this particular industry slide forever, evergreen into the future. But I think it's important to understand at what point in time does a market become mature? At what point in time does it become competitive, saturated? We did our part to grow it, and that's that. And now we move on to something new. So I think it's worth consideration. I would say for GITA, our board has never had any discussion about whether this is a product that should be renewed every 10 years over and over. Our board has not weighed in on that.
Well, I just think it's a good point to raise, because I mean, our tourism industry started over 50 years ago. And certainly we've seen the benefits and the whole evolution of this process. And granted, had we not experienced this pandemic, I'm sure things would have continued to grow. But there are mutual benefits also by investors that are coming in here and either maintaining or purchasing or building new hotels as well. So let's not, put that reality aside. I just want to ensure in all fairness that we are essentially all carrying the load, because at some point, I don't want to take what was intended to be an initial incentive to be a long-term agreement. And then there are perhaps other industries we might want to look at expanding in, that we might want to, expand these benefits to grow new industry. I mean, it's come up time and time again about how we need to diversify. And I know you're very much more familiar with that and the interest in doing that. And is that where our resources and these benefits should go to? Because at some point, even though I'm very much for wanting to see the development and support of our private sector, but I also want to ensure that there's equity as well. And I just don't want to see this continue, that it continues to mutate from an incentive program to a lifelong forever incentive that we're going to renovate every 10 years, which benefits that hotel industry to begin with in their facility and their investment. And yet they still continue to get tax breaks. So I just think it's important that we bridge over, that we recognize that reality, and then also look, at when do we sunset. So now if we're looking at a 10-year, because I see it got changed from 5 to 10 years, expanding another 10, another 5 years added on. And I just think we need to be mindful of that moving forward about, when does the sun finally set? And that we actually start benefiting from the revenues that come, assuming we get back to a better world where we have a viable, viable tourism industry. So I don't object at this juncture, but I think that issue needs to be put on the table, and we need to start looking at, when we stop giving away the benefits, and should we invest in other industries and focus on that so that we can diversify our economy as well. I just wanted to also ask Mr. Chair if the sponsor, Senator Moylan, had any comments with regards to that question.
Sure, Senator Moylan, do you have anything you'd like to add with respect to the comments and concerns raised by Senator Brown?
Yes. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mel, for your explanation. And going back to the original bill's intent as well, which we're just amending, the idea back then for the Public Law 32233 was a specific number of hotel rooms. That was to meet the demand projected. And we were, at that time, of course, we were going up this mountain, and we continued to climb, and things were looking really, really great. And we were only able to stop the amount of tourism that was coming into the island due to our capacity that we could fulfill. The bill is not amending the amount of hotel rooms. It's keeping it at that. And the special QC, of course, is just extending it. Since we ran into the problem with H-2B workers, and during past administration, as Mel has explained. And in addition, then we topped it off with our pandemic situation, which really slowed things down. So the main goal of the original intent of the public law is the capacity that we can have for our tourism coming to Guam. And we will be able to get back to those numbers, of course, when the health of the island improves, and also the health of our visiting tourists improves too. Overall, on the intent of this amended version, the legislature intent also includes in the explanation of the 10 years. The 10-year period is there. Understanding that if we're going to come back to this once again to further extend it, that's time will have to tell. But I do agree with you, Senator, that we are looking at other industries to also incentivize, and we still need the tax money to help our government survive and provide those necessary services. But the bill also states that once we reach this 1,600 additional rooms, then that's it. This expires. But in the meantime, as you mentioned, we have so many new jobs to be created, and we're renovating those hotels that are here now. So when our tourists do come back, they experience the 5-star experience that we can offer them with better hotel accommodations. So at this point, the extension is if we're able to reach those numbers of hotel investments with this qualifying certificate, and we're also providing the additional QC expansion for these hotels that need renovations, then the bill will end, or the public law will end, if we can get this onto session floor. So I do hear the concerns, and at this point, I think Gita is well behind us on making sure that they'll market this properly, so we can get it done sooner than later and not have to come back to discuss this once more. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
I appreciate it. And I think it's important to elaborate also for the public awareness, what's involved in this, what the advantages are for continuing to allow QC to be extended for this period of time, and what the benefits. And I agree with you, during this this unfortunate situation of what we're going through. Yes, this would be a wonderful time to polish up the product. And, you know, if there's a time to do those type of improvements or renovations or expansion, if they're able to, granted with the worker shortage issue, I mean, this would be the time to do it and not impact visitors when they do return. So again, I understand the intent. I just think it's important to bring to the table, you know, at what point, you know, do we reevaluate? Do we continue to keep giving benefits over and over again, essentially for the same facilities? But I appreciate your elaboration on what benefits also in turn we will be getting by allowing, you know, this additional 10 years up to the 1,600 number of additional hotel rooms that we were in need of. So thank you. Appreciate it, Senator Moylan, for your response to that question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to ask Geeta and Senator Moylan my questions, and thank you for the opportunity to provide my comments.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Titlegy, you're recognized.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much. And to my colleagues, good morning. And of course, my old stomping grounds at Geeta, you know, thank you, Mel, for your testimony. I'm just curious too, why there was, even myself, Mr. Chair, why there was another waiver requested, or even if there was, actually, there's a fiscal note that requested a waiver from the original bill. And then now that it's been amended, has there been an update version for the fiscal note on this new amended bill?
I don't believe so. I don't think we received an updated waiver for the fiscal note. So that's something the committee can look into and verify.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important. And I was even surprised why there was a not a fiscal note and requesting for a waiver instead of a fiscal note on something like this. Because if, you know, I agree with Senator Brown when she brought up the concern of continuing to do this and, you know, these extensions. And it does take away, you know, funding revenue from the general fund, you know. So there is some impact, I believe. There should be some impact based on this. The question I have too, Mel, is on these QCs for the hotels, the potential of individuals who want to take advantage of this on the renovations. Normal QCs are about how many years? 10 or 20 years?
We've seen up to 20 years. This particular one is 20, up to 20.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, this increased it to additional 10 years, correct?
No, I believe the original language of the special hotel QC legislation was also 20 years.
No, I mean, if this legislation should pass, to extend it an additional 10 years up to, oh no, it's additional 20 years.
The usage, the QC contract can be up to 20 years.
Right.
The law is valid for up to 10 years, or the legislation allows for up to 10 years or 1,600 hotel rooms, whichever comes first, to apply for a QC.
Okay. So I was right, it was about 10 years. You mentioned earlier in your testimony or answering a question with regards to the board hasn't had the opportunity to look into look into this thoroughly on cost or other, questions that we had. Has the board had an opportunity to discuss this legislation, this proposed legislation?
Yes, I think I was answering Senator Brown's question about has the board discussed if they want to keep on renewing this QC into the future. And I said that particular area has not been discussed by the board, but yes, they've discussed. In fact, this special hotel QC, the board was involved kind of at the committee. The very first, from my understanding, this is pre my time, but the very first special hotel QC was a board, like an ad hoc committee set up by the board. And they then put together this legislation. And then the second, iteration of the bill at this point in time, again, was informed by certain board members who sat on, again, an ad hoc committee and worked with the stakeholders, including the chamber and GHRA, et cetera, who then informed the language of the recommended amendments.
Okay. So this testimony is coming from not only from yourself, but as well as approved by the board then?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell me how many hotels currently have an active QC of these facilities, and how many are may be eligible for the new program? I think you said there was one inquiry, or?
So active holders of the qualifying certificate at this point in time are the Subaki Tower.
Okay.
We also have a hotel that has not been constructed yet, that applied for and was approved for a QC called JMSH, that is near the Akanta Mall, or the proposed site is near the Akanta Mall. The 340 rooms out of the 1,600 targeted rooms have been built, have been achieved. As far as hotels eligible for this particular QC, any hotel is eligible so long as their renovation falls within the parameters of the law. So the renovation is
10%
10% of the
renovation costs.
10% of the appraised value of the property. So if a property is a $300 million hotel, the renovation has to be at least a $30 million renovation.
I see. So you have two so far then, is what you're saying?
That's
that are
correct.
Active, only two.
2 active QCs, yes.
What kind of data does GITA have concerning the total amount of tax rebates that have been authorized for the hotel developers, at least during the last 20 years, 20 to 30 years?
Nothing, I have not seen. Data on the hotels, what they pay into the DRT in the way of BPT, income tax, and use tax. It's certainly something we can look into, but it's not something that I've seen.
Okay, yeah, I think that's important data and good information to have as we move forward. So I appreciate getting that information from you, Mel. And again, appreciate you answering all the questions that we have today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tydegui. I'd like to recognize Speaker Therese Terlahi, who's joined us. Madam Speaker, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to those who testified. I apologize for being late, but I guess I'd just like to follow up on the questions previously asked, and for this is it seems like a significant shift for GITA to advocate for. It's not just for adding rooms now, it's for renovating existing rooms, and based on the theory that having better rooms, or more modern rooms, nicer rooms, is going to bring us more tourists. And I know that we had, in the past, the QC was for additional rooms because we had a demand that was exceeding capacity at that time. Of course, that doesn't exist today. We can't really gauge this, but and then it makes shifts from 3 years. We were going on a 3-year kind of renewal basis to now 10 years. And also shifting from the minimum investment of 20% to now 10%, I guess, right? And this is all being done at a time when we keep talking about we're going to diversify our economy because that's what we need to do right now, and that's a good use of our funds. I'm concerned, Mr. Chair, because the fiscal note says there is no fiscal impact from this, and I disagree. Maybe they aren't able to calculate that today, but this is a reduction of BPT from these. This is what it's doing, is giving them a reduction of business privilege taxes. So there absolutely is a reduction. And now we're talking about not just new rooms that we haven't been counting on, but existing rooms that we have been counting as part of our the tax base, I would say, I guess. Isn't that right, Mel? That these rooms now that we're extending it to these, this type of renovation abate and then allowing abatement for existing rooms is, it's kind of, it's a departure from the original QC. It's kind of like a different program.
The original program allowed for 10% renovation as well. So this one is allowing a 20% benefit on renovation, and the original law allowed for a 10% benefit on renovation.
I think the original law said your renovation costs had to be no less than 20% of the property value, and this bill is reducing that.
I'm sorry, in reverse.
Right? Yeah, so we're reducing that as well, kind of like they don't even have to make as significant of an investment in the renovation, right? Half is half of what they were previously requiring. And yeah, and I guess, how did GITA come to that number, reducing from 20 to 10%?
The improvement of existing hotel rooms was something that was informed by GVB's data on the visitor experience that and GVB's kind of ongoing discussion that the hotel rooms in Guam need to be upgraded. And then the idea to do it now was that this is a timely point in time to undergo renovation, because in the event a hotel takes their hotel offline today to do renovations, there is a minimal impact because they're not earning today. They're not incurring revenue today that would then be a tax income to the government of Guam. But renovation was on the table in the original law, in the original QC. Yes, we did increase the incentive, and we did increase the incentive, which was informed by our stakeholders. If you would feel more comfortable with more information from on how much what the actual impact is on the tax base, I think that DRT would be the best in the best position to speak to that, specific to the hotels. We don't have access to that.
Consider that when they submitted their support for this program, did they consider that the effect on the tax base that we're all trying to work with, including GITA? And yeah, do we have data that shows, yeah, what the change in visitors is going to be through renovation of existing hotel rooms versus the original intent of just expanding the number of hotel rooms we had?
I'm sure GVB might be better to articulate what they project as income from a visitor to a nicer hotel room versus status quo hotel room.
Not showing, the data is not showing that.
Well, it doesn't show. Yeah, it doesn't. Sorry, Senator Tello, your microphone is on. The yeah, I guess I can't see that in front of me, and I can't see how GITA came to their determination. So first of all, we haven't reached the 1,600 rooms under the original program, and and because we hadn't reached that, GITA had in the past extended, that for a couple of years at a time, trying to get to that goal of 1,600. And then, but now we're going to give these tax breaks for, a lesser renovation investment based on the property values. Okay, well, what about, why is GITA supporting a 20-year tax break on this type of renovation as opposed to 10 years or any other number of years, or just a couple of years even?
The original QC law also stated 20 years, and based on our input from the stakeholders, 20 years was what was
Well, when you say input from stakeholders, you mean the hotel industry, right? And of course, they're going to advocate that they get 20-year tax breaks. But is there any analysis that from Gita that we can use so we can say, that this is going to bring this benefit, for real, or this is, so we can measure this after the end of 20 years as to whether, like you say, at the end of 10 years, see whether we want to extend it. But we're giving the tax breaks now for 20 more years and, for each project. And that's significant, I think, whilst we have a lot of uncertainty. And like was said earlier by one of my colleagues, we're not giving these kind of tax breaks to other industries. And we need to give these to industries we're trying to attract. So, if we're dealing with a limited tax base, yeah, which industries are we trying to attract and where are we going to prioritize, that type of incentive? I don't think it's bottomless. There has to be like an amount that we are willing to use to incentivize companies to do certain activities, and we have to prioritize that. And so I guess for Gita, is the hotel industry the priority at this time as far as incentivizing industries for 20 years worth of taxes?
Well, I think that it's worth pointing out that in the pandemic, the tourism industry is by far the most hit industry, the most affected industry, not only in Guam, but worldwide. And so I do think that the tourism industry, which is an industry that we've had on the island that provides the number of jobs it provides. I think if you talk to Gita, they'll tell you exactly what the economic impact of the visitors industry is in Guam.
Wait, I am. We are talking to Gita.
If you talk to GVB, you'll understand the exact impact of the visitors to Guam.
It's not the impact of the
Gita did not write this law, so we're we can certainly provide additional support information that makes you more comfortable. But when the law was introduced, we provided input, and if that input is not sufficient, then we can certainly look for more information and more data to make you more comfortable. I think it's just a matter of it was a law that was already in place, and so we were working off of something that was already in place. We went to our existing stakeholders in the hotel industry, and as well as drawing on the experience of reaching out to investors in the last 10 years. And what that's been like, or in the last several years, and what that's been like for our team here at Gita. And that was what informed this iteration of the bill. So I think that Speaker, it's well within, if you'd like more information, we'd be happy to do our best to find that information. GVB has a lot of information. DRT might have the information as well. But we were primarily looking at the law that existed already, that was sunsetting in December. And we said, what has worked in the last 10 years about this law? What has not worked in this law? And there continues to be a shortage of rooms. The demand was determined to be 1,600 rooms. That was not an arbitrary number. There was a study done at that point in time. 1,600 rooms. We have not achieved that. So that was how we were basing our feedback on this bill. But sure,
that's why I'm asking you, because Gita has, they're supporting this bill, and so I just want to get to the root of that. Like, what did you have in front of you that we might not have in front of us? And it's not a matter of making me comfortable. It's a matter of, are we passing good policy? And so I just want to know what we have to back it up, right? That shows it's good policy. The original law to create 1,600 new rooms, I can see that. And at the time, that's what we needed. So if we wanted to extend that because we haven't made the 1,600 rooms, I wouldn't have any questions. I can see that. It's very obvious. We didn't make the 1,600 rooms yet. We need to extend it longer because there's a downturn in the economy, and we need to give them more time to get the capacity to build up the 1,600, right? And to see again the demand for it so that they feel comfortable making that investment. So extending that original program, I don't have a problem with. I just want to say, go back to, we're talking about rebates for 20 years or abatements for 20 years for renovations for hotels that are currently existing. So they're not necessarily going to increase the number of tourists that we bring into Guam. They may not increase our revenue. I mean, so we're holding all of this on this theory that making the room, this one hotel's rooms nicer is going to bring in tourists that we might not have. But these hotels were at capacity when, you know, back in the day when we thought we needed 1,600 more rooms. So yeah, so I don't know. I guess it's that if there's a shift to, you know, we're going to give tax rebates on existing rooms. I just think we all need to recognize what we are taking away from our current tax base as well, right? That's significant, and we're doing it for 20 years going forward from today, and we're doing it perhaps at the expense of, you know, we account for that. If it's not accounted for right now because the fiscal note says no impact, but if we account for that, we may be foregoing opportunity to diversify our economy and using that abatement instead for, you know, the other industries that I know Gita is working very, very hard to attract and to bring in. So if there's any information that Gita used to make its decision, yes, if you could provide that, that would help. If who the stakeholders are that you say, you know, you consulted, and because if it's hotel industries, of course, I would think they're who's not going to ask for a 20-year abatement of business privilege taxes? Who's not? Every industry would want that if you ask them. So, you know, I just want to be able to prove on the government side that this is a very worthwhile investment, and it's going to do something different than what we already planned to do, right? Which was to attract more visitors and that type of thing. And if we're shifting to, you know, that it's more worthwhile to go for a visitor that likes, you know, the nicer hotel room versus the existing hotel room, you know, that I've heard those, but that's a significant shift, I think, than what GVB has actually, you know, they're modeled after an increased number of visitors, right? And that's where that 1,600 came from. Okay, so yeah, if you got anything that shows why we're doing 20 years versus any other year for the tax abatement, how that, besides, you know, that the stakeholders like 20 years versus a shorter period of time, is a shorter period of time going to enough is, I guess, my question to Gita. And my question is, yeah, you know, why did they reduce the value of the contribution from 20% to 10%? What was the motivation for that? Otherwise, just expanding the current program for a few more years until we reach its full potential, I would have no objection to that. So thank you. Thank you, Mel, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd also like to recognize Senator Sabina, who's here this morning as well. I'm sorry, Mel,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I did want to point out one clarification that I think has escaped. You know, the maximum benefit is capped at the value of the qualifying certificate. Hold just a moment while I kind of walk through this. If the benefit is determined to be, you're putting in $30 million in improvements, and that's determined to meet the parameters of the law, then you're only, the cap of your benefit is that $30 million. So you'll never get more benefit than you've put in. And the reason it's spread out over 20 years is because I believe a longer period of time, you have some leveling out of the, or reduction of the benefit versus one big hit within the first 5 years, or a bigger hit within the first 5 years. I think that then maybe that's something that, if I can articulate that, I think that is why the original intent of the special hotel QC was a 20-year benefit, was so that the benefit could be spread out over a longer period versus the fiscal hit being within a shorter time frame. I'm sorry, 20% of the 30 million. I said 30 million. They put in 30 million. They get a $30 million benefit. That's not correct. Ed Camacho, my business development manager, just wrote it down in front of my face. 20% of the 30 million. So $6 million benefit that they can take over 20 years versus over 5 or over 10. I think that, and so it's a more it's a less hurtful hit to the financial statement. Sorry, I'm sorry about the lack of clarity.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, and for the renovation though, you're allowing 20% of their total construction cost versus for the new hotel construction, it was 10% of the total construction cost. So yeah, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Perez, you're recognized.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the dialogue thus far. I agree with a lot of the concerns. So one thing, Mel, I have a question for you. The 1,600 room capacity was determined back when our tourist industry was thriving. Has there been I guess a reevaluation of that number, considering the pandemic we're in? I've seen other locations. They're touting their green destinations. They have a branding that's much more I think worldwide. It's attractive worldwide. And with Guam, I just want to see if it has been reassessed with the branding that we have, or has the branding changed so that we can reassess this room number?
That's a very good question, Senator. I think that GVB would probably be in the best position to answer questions on the branding of Guam. Having said that, that's a lot of the reason why we were leaning towards more generous benefits on renovation, was because the footprint for more hotel rooms, while more hotel rooms was what was required with the 1,600 number, we also thought that it was important. It was equally important to improve the quality of our hotel rooms. A renovation can include the installation of solar panels. A renovation can also include more efficient uses of water. Our hotels are the most, they use the most water on our island. And a renovation that can make that efficient would be counted towards a renovation that would be in this that would qualify as a renovation under this qualifying certificate. So we were looking at it as well through that lens of a green economy and more sustainability in our hotel rooms by a better quality hotel room, not just a better quality for our visitors that show up, but a better quality for our island. And so I'm glad that you pointed that out. And I know that GVB is in the midst of kind of not a repositioning, but just a study of how to move Guam forward in a post-pandemic tourism environment. So I know that they're actively working on that right now.
Okay. Yeah, the other thing is I noticed like I guess, QC laws that came after that, this one had more accountability measures from my understanding. So when you talk about quality versus quantity, right? So, how can, we, I guess, include more accountability measures? If we're saying that, okay, the branding for Guam is a green destination or something else, right? So how can we tie that into, these QC laws? Because this one's based on an old law, right? So, there's, what other things can we do to kind of increase the accountability aspect?
Sure. I think, Senator, I think that's a great question. And this is just a new comment. Okay, this is not something that we've run through stakeholders, but one thing you can do is there are various levels of checks for the qualifying certificate. So you start with a letter of intent to apply, you submit the full application. One modification we can make to the application is to submit your plans as far as anything that you're doing to make your property more environmentally friendly, or to respect the culture, or whatever it is that you'd like to consider. That we can add that to the application process. That's the first thing. The second thing is it does go through the board. So what happens is the GITA team reviews it. We could ask for some input on a committee level from certainly from others, from environmental type stakeholders, like we could bring in a representative from the EPA, or we could bring in a representative to weigh in on their plans. We could certainly do that prior to being recommended to the board. And so that way, if they're building the worst hotel ever that's producing the most garbage and waste, et cetera, then somebody could point that out to a subject matter expert could point that out, and we can then take that to the board for their consideration. But that would just be, I think, that could be that could be accomplished through an SOP change. And so I think in the law, it would be.
You don't need to do the law.
Yeah, I don't think you need to do anything to the law besides maybe articulating
The
board shall adopt SOPs that the board shall include in its QC SOP processes for determining environmental and cultural impact.
And they may not issue this.
Okay.
I think that would help with this, with where we are today, trying to get our island to a really great sustainable position.
Okay, great. And then the other question I have is maturity. So you mentioned earlier that, you know, we don't want QCs to just be endless, right? So how do you determine maturity of industry? And this time, during this time especially, right? Because yeah, tourism is going to be probably impacted for quite some time, is my guess, unless something, you know, miraculous happens. Yeah, it's I think globally it's being hit hard, pretty hard in other places. Globally, it's hit hard. So, you know, how do you determine maturity in this type of environment?
Well, maturity for an industry is generally determined by how quickly or how much an industry is growing or how much it's contracting. So if you see that the tourism industry is growing at a rapid rate, which it was pre-pandemic with banner numbers, et cetera, then it is clear that the market is not, that the industry is not quite mature yet. If we had, if the industry was contracting for any reason other than a global pandemic or a typhoon or a war, right? If the market conditions were status quo, but the industry was contracting, then, and the proxies that we'd use to whether or not an industry contracts is, we'd look to see what the revenue is from various sources. We look at the employment and the payroll taxes that come out of this industry. If this industry is contracting, at that point in time, it's a mature industry, and even an industry on the decline. Generally, you wouldn't want to hand out incentives unless you're trying to do some kind of significant repositioning to, you know, buoy that industry up. When an industry is booming, when it is growing, sometimes you have to assess, if I do nothing, will organic growth be enough to support it? Because at the same time, Guam competes with other destinations. We compete with destinations. And again, GVB would probably be would better articulate this today, but we compete with destinations with cheaper labor, with hotels that are newer, with golf courses that have just been built, and I think that those are all things that need to be taken into the competitive position. Generally, is another thing that's taken into consideration when deciding on incentives, and so all of those factors are taken into account. Now, in the initial authoring of this particular legislation, the study that was done by GVB saying we lacked 1,600 hotel rooms, that took into account all of those factors, our competitive position, supply and demand, and all of that. And that's how they came up with the recommendation for 1,600 rooms. And so if I'm sitting if I'm sitting here in 10 years and talking about how this industry is, I would demand, rather if on your side of the house, you should ask for exactly the information you're asking for, is how have we determined 1,600? So, because if I came to you and I said, we need another 2,000 rooms, and that was founded on nothing, then clearly that would be problematic, right? So.
tourism 2020.
This was based off of tourism 2020. The 1,600 rooms, I believe.
Oh, it was. That was pre-pandemic though, right? Obviously.
It was, but Senator, I want to point out that pandemic is not expected to be a protracted. It's been protracted by 2 years we're looking at, right? But it's not. This is supposed to be a shock, a one-time shock to the system that we may. Over the last 20 years, if you think about the shocks to the tourism industry, we've had nuclear threats from Korea, we've had SARS, we've had typhoons, right? This is the longest of those events, but we don't view our trends in tourism based on one event. We look at it as in total. We look at the total relationship. We look at the total the trends over the period of time. So I would. They say don't make decisions. What is it they say in finance? They don't say don't make decisions about money when you're in distress or in mourning or just about to experience a major life event. And I would translate that over to making decisions about government finances when, rather, I don't want to overstep, but when it comes to tourism, I don't know if I just look at the pandemic and let that view determine my course forward. I look at the pandemic in relation to the tourism industry, which, as Senator Brown had pointed out, has been in Guam for 50 years. This pandemic has been in Guam for 1.5.
and counting, right? I think it's really, the pandemic is a disruptive factor, I think, in all levels. And this is something I think a little different. When you talk about the one-time shock, right? Being lasting so long, I think it has more of a deeper effect, and it has a disruptive effect on economies and our health, right? So, yeah, I wouldn't discount this as being, as one of those things to evaluate how to grow the economy. In fact, yeah, I think we need to, if this is the new, people say this is the new norm. So how can we better tool, I think the way to move forward is to adapt, right? We have to adapt if we're going to survive. And adapting economically is one way. And I think, we need to know this information before moving forward with this. I think, I think there even has to be a roundtable even, how do we better tool our policies from the past, right, to adapt to what we're experiencing now? Because I consider this more of a long-term thing. So yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mel, for your responses.
Thank you, Senator Perez. Senator Moreland, before I recognize you for closing, I have a few things I'd like to discuss as well, and some issues to bring up. I share a lot of the same concerns that were raised earlier. Of course, concerns raised by Senator Brown and Taitegui and Perez and Madam Speaker as well. The idea behind QCs initially are to entice investment to create new industries. And this is by no means a new industry. It's a 50-year industry. I think the question was brought up, how do you know if an industry is mature? I think our tourism industry is mature. It's 50, not to mean that we can't grow it more, it can continue to mature, but it's definitely, the tourism industry has been established. It's not an industry that has not been built. It's definitely been built up. And so the question as policymakers is, how far do we want to go in supporting the tourism industry? And when does it become sort of a perpetual subsidy by the government? Of course, there are some industries that you do want to perpetually subsidize based on whatever economic impacts they provide, whatever economic benefits those industries provide. There are certain industries that you do want to subsidize in perpetuity. Agriculture is an industry that's subsidized in the US states in perpetuity, essentially. So there are some industries you do want to. The question is how much, and when are those subsidies exactly necessary? So specifically with the renovation of rooms, what we're doing with this, if we were to pass it, is we're subsidizing private businesses, their maintenance. we're basically saying, all right, you guys who've made a lot of money over all these years in a booming tourism economy, you never maintained your rooms. Well, now we're going to help you maintain them. So there's a little bit of that that needs to be weighed as far as, again, how much do we want to subsidize private industry when, you know, part of business is maintaining your infrastructure of your business. That's a part of doing business. It should be in your business plans. You should definitely plan on maintaining. You know, Guam gets slammed all the time because we don't maintain our stuff, right? So we build buildings, we build schools, and then we let it go by the wayside. So here you have people who've constructed hotels and now they need to renovate it. So now they're coming to us to help them renovate it, right? So those are some of the concerns that I do have with this measure. In addition to that, I do have a question. The 1,600 rooms. So initially, when this was passed, when it became law, it was supposed to sunset in 2019 and then allowed GITA a 2-year extension. I believe if I read the bill correctly, I think it said 300 some rooms were added in that time. Is that correct, Mel? Was there only one QC that got granted 300 rooms?
340 rooms.
340
We did have an appetite for investors for more rooms that probably would meet the demand. But of course, the H-2B visa crisis kind of threw a wrench in that for the time being, at the time.
So that is kind of, I mean, the QC was, you know, around for a while. How many years in total was it available for, including the 2-year extension?
7 years.
So that's what I guess that's what I'm getting at. There was a 7-year window already. Only one person took advantage of it. So the question is, who's interested in taking advantage of it now? Why is it being requested to be extended now? Are there specific hotels that have approached, you've mentioned about stakeholders, are there specific hotels that have approached the GITA board and said, hey, we'd like to build a hotel and expand, and we'll first start with the new rooms. Are there specific hotels and investors? And if so, can you name them?
Sure, just a moment, please. Let me see.
Yeah, JMSH, they had.
We had JMSH is the one that I cited earlier next to Conta Mall.
But they
were looking at a
building before. I remember JMSH is the one that next to a Conta Mall. They were talking about building next to a Conta Mall when I was still working at a Conta Mall for the Pacific News Center. That's why I know, is we were already doing reports on how that company was supposed to build a hotel near their Conta Mall. And during that time, the QC was available. They didn't apply for it then, correct?
No, they did. They did apply. They were approved, but the H-2B visa stopped them up. They had plans for 500 rooms. There was another organization called Blue Ocean Investments that we received a letter of intent from in 2017. But the application, they reported a delay in their application due to labor issues. 300 rooms was what they had planned. Guam International Airport, there was a hotel that was planned to be Guam International Airport Hotel, 246 rooms. They received Guam Land Use Commission approval, and GITA had some follow-up meetings with them. Same issue with the H-2B visas. We had another hotel room, there was a Cortec put in interest for one, Garden Villa LLC put in interest for one, 106 rooms. So we've definitely had some interest. I think 7 years, Senator. So if we've been in this pandemic, let's say for 1.5 years, investors couldn't fly to Guam and check out any properties, right? Let's say brand new investors. They couldn't come to Guam and check out any properties and say, I'm going to sign on the dotted line. Prior to that, we had the H-2B visa, which I think predated the start of this administration, that was like 2018-ish, 2017, 2018, right? And so that takes us back 3-4 years, just about. So 2 years of H-2B, 2 years, 3 years, the first year after the law gets passed, we got to set up our employees. They got to go on some road shows and things like that, and start courting investors, right? And so these are all, I think, things that took into account why there was the lag in the 7 years. I don't think the 7 years was because there wasn't an appetite. I certainly think there was. I think that it was probably a combination of, a series of unfortunate events, to put it plainly.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. So now we do have an idea that there are specific businesses waiting in the wings, so to speak. And so they've said that if this QC extension is granted, they intend on moving forward with their projects. That's what they've relayed to Gita.
They relayed that the labor issues were an issue, and they continue to be an issue. So my interpretation of that is, if labor issues continue to be an issue, then this QC will not be very useful either, or will not, if labor issues continue to be an issue. And if in the meantime, an equivalent or a better investment in our neighboring island or a competitor destination pops up, then they will do that. So I think this will help, but this is not the silver bullet that'll get all these groups to come to Guam. No.
Okay. Yeah, basically if they can't get construction workers, they can't move forward. So now I know the bill is looking at extending it for 10 years. So just to clarify, because I know Senator Tide, did bring it up, and I guess specifically for those listening and paying attention, I just wanted to clarify it so that it's clear what the bill would do if passed. It would create a new 10-year window for people to apply for the QC. So up until December 31st of 2031, people would be able to apply for this QC. And the QC includes the ability to renovate and get 20% on the amount you spent on renovations of rooms or whatever you're renovating. And then, or to build new rooms. And so people would have a 10-year window to apply for that. And then if they get it, then that's a 20-year QC. But as you mentioned, the point of the 20 years is to spread out that amount over a longer period. So just wanted to clarify a couple of those things just for those listening, because people have heard 10 years and 20 years. So I just wanted people at home or whoever's listening to this to be sure they understand that it's 10 years to apply for it. Then when you get it, it's 20 years from when you're granted it, if you're granted it. The only other concerns I have I'm just echoing what some of my colleagues said earlier, is of course we talk a lot about diversification and looking at creating new industries, which is my big thing. I'm all about creating new industries in agriculture. So I do think we need to focus a lot on diversification, and that is a question we have to ask ourselves, is how much do we want to continue to subsidize the hotel industry on Guam versus creating new industries and diversifying our portfolio so that when we are hit by things like pandemics and other things, we're a little more stable. We do need to create industries that are pandemic proof, so to speak. And I know one industry that's pandemic proof, it would be agriculture, because people got to eat. So no matter what, I'm going to keep pitching agriculture forever. So
hotels buy vegetables, Senator. I'm sorry to interrupt, but hotels buy from our farmers.
Not if there's no tourists. Not if there's no tourists. Who are they going to give the vegetables? You know who buys food every day, no matter what? The people who live here on Guam need to eat every day. So that's definitely a pandemic-proof industry. So with that, I'd like to, I'm going off track here and I apologize. So I'll end my discussion there, and I'll now go to the sponsor of the bill, Senator Jim Moylan, and allow him the opportunity to close on his measure. Senator Moylan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking forward to eating my salad this afternoon. I appreciate that information. And thank you, colleagues, for sharing some great questions. And I think this is very helpful as we go about to see how we want to move this bill forward, hoping to get it, of course, to session floor, and we can continue our discussion there. Mr. Chairman, before my closing remarks, we did receive a letter last minute here from the Guam Chamber of Commerce, I believe was submitted. Kind of request if I can just read the one-page letter and then go to my closing remarks, please.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is addressed, of course, to you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee. regarding Bill 6636 as amended in the committee, and reads, Hafaday Chairman Ridgell and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to submit additional comments on Bill 6636 core. We acknowledge and commend the bill's proposed extended, I'm sorry. Let me make sure here I got the right one. Yes, I got it here. Okay. We acknowledge and commend the bill's proposed extend Public Law 32233 an additional 10 years to sunset on 2031, and the authority of GITA's board to extend the opportunity another 2 years. Additionally, the bill further outlines specific tax rebates and abatement on new hotel construction and hotel renovations and expansions. Raising the tax benefit can only serve to support much needed inward investment for our island. As Guam and the rest of the world struggle to survive and recover from the coronavirus pandemic, the special qualifying certificate will provide much needed incentives for investors to consider Guam as a good choice to establish, foster, and grow their investment. The extension would proffer the time necessary for hotelers and investors to plan next steps for development beyond 2021, sunset in the current law. Any new expansion supported by this special qualifying certificate would result in the creation of new jobs as well as additional forms of economic activity. And understanding the road to economic recovery will draw out over the next several years. Extended special QC sunset provisions would be much welcome necessity for our island. But we encourage you, your committee members, and all your 36 Guam legislature to support Bill 6636. And we appreciate the work of the Guam Economic Development Authority on this bill and its efforts to attract investment to Guam. We would like to extend our appreciation to the authors of the measure working with GITA on the details of the proposal to support economic potential this provision will have on our island and the quality of life for our residents. And we appreciate your consideration for support of the passage of this bill. Sejuis Maasi, Catherine Castro, President, Guam Chamber of Commerce. Thank you again, colleagues, for this very well discussion here, and GITA for participating and answering many of our questions. As we know for now, today, our main industry on Guam is tourism. And expanding that to other industries is our ultimate goal. But today, this is what we have. And over 18,000 jobs are associated with this industry. And right now, this industry has put a lot of people out of work, but we'll come back. And why it comes back is because Guam is a geographic location to Asia, which many of the other markets don't have. It's a 3-hour plane ride to and from, and our tourists will come on back and with their golf clubs and ready to take advantage of all the other sub tours that they can participate in. That's what attracts us, and that's what makes us shine compared to other places in the world. Our geographic location. If we move this bill forward, we would significantly help this industry and rehire many of the employees, over 18,000 of them, especially now, and the quicker the better, because PUA is ended and we need to have these folks back into work. And providing this QC is a definite step in that direction. As of now, when we consider the tax losses maybe to the government in one form, but we can generate tax in another form. Right now, the industry has zero revenue, so there's zero taxes to be paid. But if investment into this tourism industry will bring back the quality of life for employees that are desperately looking for a way to get back to work. And as we diversify our economy, we can also supplement our economy with tourism. It has taken a hit, but it's not going to go away. And if we do both simultaneously, I think that will be better outcome for our island. So I appreciate also Mr. Chairman and for having this second hearing. And I thank GITA and my colleagues for presenting, being here today and asking some wonderful questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moylan, and thank you to all of my colleagues for your participation. Thank you, Mel, also for making yourself available today and answering all of the questions we had for you today. And if there are no further questions or comments, Senator Tidewee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I sent you a text just to ask Gita to remind them, please, with regards to my questions on what kind of data does Gita have concerning the total amount of tax rebates and that has been authorized for hotel developers in the last or during the past 20, 30 years. So it's important to get that information. I know that she'll work on it. And a lot of times we ask for this information, Mr. Chair, and we don't get it, you know, so I'm hoping that we can get that information provided to you and then you can share it amongst us.
The committee will request that information and we'll include it in the committee report.
As well as the fiscal note as well, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yes. Melanie?
If I might just make a comment on that, we're happy to provide the information historicals on QCs and the benefits that they've been granted under the QC. But if you want specific tax information, even as an aggregate, as opposed to an individual taxpayer, which I believe is highly confidential, I would recommend that the committee make a separate request to DRT as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there are no further questions or comments, this concludes our discussions on Bill 66-36 COR. The committee will continue to accept written statements on today's hearing within 10 business days from today, which may be mailed to my office at 238 Archbishop Flores Street, Suite 906 of the DNA Building in Hagåtña. You may also send your statements to us at Ridgell at guamlegislature.org. That's CLYNTRIDGELL at guamlegislature.org, or you can send it by fax to 475-4768. Thank you all for your participation. This virtual public hearing is adjourned. It is 10:33 a.m. Thank you.